international peace and security require a firm belief by the peoples of the world that they will not be subjected to unprovoked attack. Shattering all precedents, the United States enters into peacetime alliance with nations in Europe. The North Atlantic Treaty draws America and Canada and 6 European countries into a union for mutual defense against any aggressor. It is simultaneously announced by all of the participating countries. By its terms, an attack upon any member nation is an attack upon all. The pact is hailed by England and by Canada, which already has hemispheric defense agreements with the United States. Despite communist opposition, the 20-year treaty is welcomed by France and the other member countries. These include Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Norway. Together with their possessions, these countries extend a line of democratic solidarity north of the Tropic of Cancer from the River Elbe to Alaska. Italy, Denmark, Greenland, and Portugal, along with Iceland, are due to join to stand together against the threat of communist advance from the East, backed by the power and resources of the United States. In Washington, the importance of the pact is brought out by Secretary of State Acheson.
The Atlantic Pact is a collective self-defense arrangement among the countries of the North Atlantic area. It is the firm intention of the parties to carry out the pact in accordance with the provisions of the United Nations Charter, and in a manner which will advance its purposes and principles. It is clear that the North Atlantic Pact is not an improvisation. It is the statement of the facts and lessons of history.
And the lessons of history were learned in this century slowly, expensively, bloodily. Twice war swept across Europe. Twice non-interventionist America was forced to intervene. In 1914, Germany went to war against the Allies. Less than 3 years later, America had to spend the lives of her men and the wealth of her land to help end that war. After the 1918 armistice, a League of Nations was established to keep the peace. But American policies of that time kept the United States out, and lacking authority, the League could not prevent the outbreak of World War II. As totalitarian conquest mounted, America was forced to give up the neutrality principle of an earlier century when oceans were barriers and wars were not global. America had once again been drawn into the vortex, her intentions of minding her own business having served only to encourage the dictators. Today, hoping to avoid the errors that brought on 2 wars, American citizens ponder this proposed alliance, the basic principles of which are emphasized by Washington newspaper correspondent James Reston.
The North Atlantic Pact is based on a couple of fairly simple ideas. The first one is that dictators don't start wars unless they think they can win them. The second idea is just about as simple. It is that no aggressor is likely to start a war if he thinks he has to fight the United States before he gets finished.
One great power, Russia, stands out today as a possible aggressor. The Soviet dictatorship has already brought much of Europe under its complete domination and, by intimidation, threatens the rest. It still maintains the largest military force in the world. Behind this armed might, the developments of the North Atlantic Pact may have been reflected in the recent changes in the Soviet High Command. Vyacheslav Molotov, Russian foreign minister for many years, was succeeded by Andrei Vyshinsky at right. But while the men of the powerful Politburo at first remained poker-faced concerning the Atlantic Pact, their underlings abroad did not. French communist leader Torre proclaimed loyalty to Moscow over loyalty to France. In Italy, communist chief Togliatti led a red filibuster against the Atlantic Treaty. And in America, the Kremlin's echo was sounded by party leaders Foster and Dennis, who agreed with Torre and Togliatti word for word and thought for thought. And now there is the threat that the red tactics of violence and propaganda will be used to fight the Atlantic Pact, just as they have been used to fight another joint effort by the Western democracies, the Marshall Plan. But today it is noteworthy that while the nations of Europe are working towards economic health, the Atlantic Pact proposes to keep them free from military aggression. Russian power diplomacy had showed its hand in Berlin. Here, the Soviets' attempt to starve the city into submission and force out the Western Allies was prevented by mobilizing the Great Airlift. All the while, Western Europe had been moving toward closer political integration. In March last year, the Brussels Pact bound Britain, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg in military and political alliance. The principles and progress of this pact were reported to former U.S. Secretary Marshall and gradually developed into the West's big answer to the methods of Soviet Russia. Finally, representatives of the Brussels Pact nations met in Washington with representatives of the United States, Norway, and Canada to draft the present North Atlantic Treaty. With this historic pact came new hopes for real international federation as proposed by the Atlantic Union Committee, whose spokesman is former Supreme Court Justice Owen J. Roberts.
After Congress has acted on the pact, our committee will ask the Congress to pass a resolution calling a convention to explore how far the United States and the other democracies can go towards forming a true federation. That federation would be formed within the United Nations.
Today, within the framework of the United Nations Charter, the first step toward a probable democratic federation is being explored. A group of countries who share a common heritage and principles of democratic government seek to strengthen their security through a pact sanctioned by the Charter itself. Millions of people are now being asked to pass judgment upon a most important foreign policy decision, affecting peace not only for them, but for all of the United Nations.